I'm so glad to see someone else who likes to drink out of jars. They're the only thing that's big enough.
Oh, look at the panda.
I know, my little panda.
Yeah, mine is back there, and I don't really have a good place to put it next to me. So, but
Well, this
anyway,
will probably
I have two pandas now. I have a panda in Texas and a panda here.
that's it. That's
I see
awesome.
it peeking out over your shoulder on the bookshelf.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Say
So
I have my hippo, but
Oh,
it's
yeah. Okay. Yes, I hadn't actually focused on that white face there in the middle shelf. Yes, there he is.
well,
Anyway,
Amelia, we are so excited to talk with you, and I already started recording because we just constantly have to remind ourselves we just get in a conversation and we forget to introduce our guest, and it just becomes kind of like a party. So this is Amelia Cohen-Levy, everybody. And we'll let you introduce yourself and why you're here, and just full notice to everyone, we never know what we're going to talk about on these shows. Sometimes we have an idea, a little inkling, but it goes places that we don't ever predict. So yeah, also like,
did you see somebody on LinkedIn
yeah,
made this lovely comment yesterday that these our conversations were his favorite conversations.
I know he said that they always brought hope, and
That's it. That's right. That's
it
right.
made my weekend. I was like, damn,
Absolutely.
what a good thing to say, or what a good thing to feel, all of
Yeah,
those
I
things.
know. I know.
So, Amelia, when you introduce yourself, maybe also introduce, I don't know, what do you want to talk about?
Well, all right. So I'm Amelia. I am a speechwriter and communication specialist. I focus on change management. I'm a certified culture facilitator, and ultimately what it comes down to is I'm a poetry major who found my way into the land of government. Yes, we'll get back to that.
Oh,
And found my way into government, from nonprofit academia publishing, found my way into government and into the intelligence community. And um, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I do all the time. All of my opinions are my own. I do not represent any specific government agency. So all of that.
who would want to, really? Well, we get right down to it. Who would want to?
I have now checked the box for my ethics advisors. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, kind of what brings me to this is, so full disclosure, I don't love podcasts. I'm not an auditory learner. So it's something to have on in the background, but I can't, when I'm working or when I'm writing, I can't have music with lyrics. I can't have podcasts because my brain just starts like pulling it in and then pushing it back out, and it doesn't quite work. So podcasts for me, I'm very selective about them, and like I have to create space to focus on them, and I have to take notes to pay attention to them because that's how my brain learns. But your podcast is one of my favorites. And you've had multiple of my, beloveds and friends and mentors on your podcasts. And so it was between that and between the fact that I have a standard practice that there are a list of people that if they say, Amelia, would you do a thing? You just say yes. And then you figure out the details of, oh, wait, why are we doing this? What are we doing? So to answer the question of why I'm here today, I don't know. Y'all asked, I said yes, and I figured we'd get to it.
Oh, like my favorite.
That's the panda way. Now I know one of your dear friends is, and I'm going to say it wrong again, but it's Lisa Parker, right?
No, that's correct. Yeah.
Yes, because I know Elisa Harper. So you can see how my brain just cannot keep these straight. Lisa Parker is, all our guests are our favorite guests, but she was amazing. And
Another poet in the
another
intelligence
poet
community.
is a very promising start, is all I have to say.
Yes.
She and I connected many years ago through mission-focused conversations. And then as we got to know each other, we said, wait, and we found kindred spirits in one
Right.
another. So we have simultaneously solved problems, caused problems, and we've become accountability buddies because we both know how difficult it is to like leave the skiff, to do the professional development, to go to the events, to
Mhm.
to listen to the podcast. And so we've tried to make that something that we're mindful about, and
Right.
that way we don't have to go alone either.
Right. That's fantastic. Now, do you have a background from the South, which is such a marked
Lisa.
characteristic of Lisa? Yes.
So I am technically a Yankee. I was born
Okay.
in Philadelphia, but my parents moved to Texas when I was 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
So I was raised in Houston, Texas.
Mm.
And so we could argue whether Texas counts as the South because Texas is its own creature unto itself. But yes, so
Which high school did you go to?
I went to multiple high schools, but
Okay.
I started off at Lamar Senior High School.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if this is, I suspect this must be true about other states, but it seems to me that Texans' identification with the high school that they went to is really intense, you know? You'll meet, oh, I went to Katy, you know, or I went to El Paso Eastwood. That's my high school. But it's just like, I don't really hear people from other states having those same conversations.
See, I saw a lot of it with college, with like the University of Texas, University, A&M and like the UT A&M rivalry. And that was always a big deal. And it still very much is. And I have never taken sides in that debate. I love my friends from UT and from A&M.
Yeah.
But for me, high school wasn't, I mean, I don't feel a strong sense of connection to my high school. I never finished. So it wasn't,
That's
that
interesting.
I think that
Yeah.
indicates right there that I didn't feel a strong connection to
Wait,
it.
wait, wait. So can
So
we,
you
let's
just
go
sort of
into
jumped
that.
to college somehow?
Yeah.
So I dropped out of high school and I went and pursued my GED and started taking classes at the local community college. And that's where I was during 9/11. And as I was taking classes in college, and I was like, wait, I get to take ownership of my education. I get to choose what fascinates me. And yes, I have to do these requirements, but I get to like be more involved and invested. That inspired in me more of a connection to my own education
Yeah.
because I was always a bookworm. And I learned that if I actually just paid attention and did the work, I could get pretty good grades and be just fine. And so that was my journey for a while. And then I moved to Berkeley, California, and studied at the community college there. And then
Not Mills College.
so I was at community college, and then I transferred to Mills College.
Oh, so you have a connection with Abby.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you actually know her or?
I don't think I do
Yeah.
actually, but I was at that point, I was an older student by their
Uh-huh.
standards, and I didn't live on campus. So, my connections there were again very different. But that was when I had decided, you know what? I'm going to focus on poetry. I'm going to focus on literature and philosophy and humanities. And I could talk for hours about the value and importance of literature, philosophy, and humanities. And yes, of course, I can tie it to why that's all relevant to mission related work. I've been
Mm-hmm.
making that argument for STEAM, not STEM, for a
Yeah.
very long time.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Wow. I know several people who were non-traditional students, and like that. And I mean, non-traditional already starting in high school and college, not like just graduate school. And always the best students, always the most with the most foresight, always the most creative because you actually had the capacity at age whatever, 15 or 16 to say, hmm, I'm changing this up relative to everyone around me, which is an age where you actually have lots of social pressure to be like those around you. And I guess I sort of wonder to what extent your differences, and to me, I'm imagining there's personality differences, but also there's an obvious difference in your Jewishness. To what extent your differences allowed you to be a person who could sort of rise up like an eagle and look at the landscape and say, hmm, What do I want? Because it's clear that I'm different. I'm wondering about that.
Well, obviously growing up Jewish in Texas played a pretty significant role. And that's one deep dive that we could go on. But that, my Jewish identity is something that's, very personal, and it's very much a part of me. And it is in some ways, challenging in its own right, because it's hard to find a sense of, like, there's a sense of community, but also, is there a sense of community?
Right.
And so, like, that's its own challenge. But I think a lot of it for me also was that I recognized that I was very privileged growing up. And I had a lot of there was a long list of things that I did not have to worry about. And I had a significant head start. And it was, you know, partly because of that privilege that I was able to say, listen, all of these expectations y'all have, maybe I should be a lawyer, maybe I should be a rabbi, maybe I should be an opera singer, maybe I should do these things. None of those things felt right. So in that, angsty teenage rebellion, I said, maybe I'll, see if my band will make it. I'll do open mic nights and play guitar badly and be a folk singer. And, maybe I'll explore that route a little bit. And that took me on, a lot of very interesting journeys that I would not necessarily advocate my children go on.
Not at all.
It kind of worked out in the end for me, but I think the my Jewishness is tied to this sense of, being a bit of a nomad,
Mm,
in that, I have senses of home, but I'm also not afraid to go take a journey, see where it leads, figure it out. And that's been pretty emblematic of my entire adult life, certainly my career choices. Um, and so, yeah, it's just the idea of, you know, kind of that Buddhist, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, but also the idea of home is, what you carry with you, and
mm,
not necessarily a fixed place or a fixed point in time.
right. Right. Well, there's that wonderful, gosh, who is that rabbi who writes about a temple in time? It says that the Sabbath, the Shabbat, the seventh day on which you rest, is a temple in time, because the Jews had their temples destroyed, and then it's like, well, they had to build one in time instead of space. Gosh, who is that one? But anyway, we'll
Love
find
that.
it and we'll post it. So yeah, I think there's a special relationship between the mystical part of Judaism and your temporal journeys, and finding a home in time, not necessarily in space. Uh,
I-
that's
Yeah,
that's really cool.
I have so many questions. One, I'm just curious if you want to share why you dropped out of high school. What was it? Because obviously you are a person who wants to learn. So there's that, just curious about that. And then given your that background, you alluded to it, that these are things you wouldn't necessarily tell your children or advise your children to do. So what do you advise your children to do, given your background? You can answer these questions or throw out better ones as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean, I think I acknowledge that, looking back, I think the reason I dropped out was I was bored.
Mhm.
I was bored. There was this, it was a big Texas high school and football. And, I tried out, ROTC for a little bit. And I tried out, I was in chorus, and I tried all of these different things, but I didn't really fit with a group. And so I didn't have that sense of community. And so I didn't feel beholden to it. I found my community outside of school, and I'm going, well, if all of my friends are older and none of them are really at this school or in school at all, then, why don't I foster those connections outside? And I mean, I don't want to say no one tried to stop me, but it happened. And
Mhm.
I think, in terms of what I advise, both like the people, when I serve as a mentor for people, and when, and for my own children, it's the idea of, if you can figure out what you're excited about, what you're passionate about, like that, that Platonic Socratic idea of learn everything, but eventually you're going to figure out your aptitudes and your passions, and then we're going to guide you along those paths. it's trying to really apply that at the earliest possible phase, and then also help to see the interconnectedness. I know somebody who, wants to be an engineer, but also wants to be an artist, but also wants to be an architect. And so there are lots of conversations about, well, let's talk about the intersections of where those things go, so math, right? Art, sketching, drawing, absolutely. Science and understanding how things fit together, and just study those things and enjoy those and find, passion in them and be excited by them. And we can figure out what you're going to be when you grow up later. And oh, by the way, you can change your mind, and you can change your mind again and again and again. And so I think also it's kind of the generation that I'm in, where it's, we grew up thinking that we picked a career and that was your career for life. And oh, if you change, it's because of retirement or you're bucking a trend. And careers don't really work like that anymore. We've seen that borne out. So just trying to instill that early on, just to say you don't have to make one choice and stick with it. So do what you're excited about. It's that if you do what you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. It's like, yeah, work is still work. You still have to work.
Yeah.
But if you're doing what you love, you'll find those things more naturally.
I just finished yesterday. I mean, it's only 17 minutes long, but for some reason it took me a little time to watch Jerry Seinfeld's Duke graduation
Oh
address.
yeah, I want to catch that. Yeah.
And he speaks to the value of work for work's sake. And he also speaks to some kids can't know their, for whatever reason, going on mental health or just whatever's going on in their life plan, they can't know what they're excited about yet. And so that great, then that'll be in the future, so it's like wherever you are in this developmental path, you can know that eventually you will figure that out if you allow yourself to be open to it and you don't, ding yourself all the time for not being at some place where you think you should be, because there's so many different paths, right? As you yourself saw with your own, like, I'm going to do poetry, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, you're getting me again to quote my favorite quote of probably that definitely in my top 5 quotes that I've ever read, which is Meg Wheatley, the
Yes.
business consultant from Utah, in the book Leadership and the New Science, the 1998 edition. I think she changed it. But in the epilogue, she talks about how complexity and all this stuff that we're learning, quantum, about how the universe really works. We need to bring it into our concepts of leadership and organizations. And she says at the end, she goes, based on everything I know about science, we need to live our lives in confidence, knowing that every step we take gets us closer to understanding the meaning of our lives. I read that and it was like, yes, I mean, that is my anchor. It's an idea that lifts me when I get in an occasional rut or whatever. I just remember that and it lifts me again.
So that is like the promised land in time. That's like the Jews wandering your whole life trying to figure out where's this promised land with the land of milk and honey. And that's the promised land in time. And it's not a one time in your life. It's this understanding that grows and grows and grows.
Yes, well, and
so cool.
And she never says every step you take eventually gets you to understand the meaning of your life. She said
No,
every step you take gets you closer to
right,
understanding the meaning of your life.
right.
Yeah, see, I love that idea, but the word that sticks in my head is this idea of confidence, because I don't that's not something I've ever really considered myself to be. And for people who know me, they'll be like, hang on. It's like, no, there's a lot of bravado happening here. There's a lot of fake it till you make it. There's a lot of, I would say it's imposter syndrome, but I've kind of reclaimed imposter syndrome. I had a friend once say, you're not an imposter, you are a trickster goddess, and you've got them all fooled. Good for you.
Right.
So,
I love that.
that energy, right?
You got the title. You got the title now, Julia.
Yes,
Trickster
exactly.
Goddess.
Trickster goddess. You've got them all fooled.
But I think that idea is crucial, because especially when it comes to being a mother, I've been fortunate to meet all of these amazing people, and just like I pull them aside and be like, how did you become who you are? You are so confident. You are so centered in yourself. You're so grounded in your identity and who you are. And yet you're willing to explore and all the things, but you have this innate sense of self. And I've never really been able to kind of nail that down. So like, how were you raised? Who taught you to do that so that like I can teach that? So I can learn it for myself and I can give it to others. And, long explanations of how they were raised and who they became and all of that. But I mean, I think confidence is lovely. And I mean, I think the intersectionality between, being confident and what that means for introverts versus extroverts and what that means for nature versus
Fantastic.
nurture and all of those things, like the confluence there is that's another 5 hours of conversation and pulling books off of shelves and more research that needs to be done. But
Wow.
Well, how, I mean, gosh, it makes me wonder, confidence and faith. It just occurred to me, it never occurred to me before that there was a relationship, but are they kind of the same thing? Because like you're having faith in your nature, you're having faith in some kind of like the universe, or you're having faith in kind of meaning, that there is meaning. Even if you're not having faith in God, you're having faith in like some kind of lack of purposelessness, or I guess said positively, purposefulness for events.
I mean, I think for me these days, my faith is really centered in embracing the cognitive dissonance. That's I don't want to say that's where I find certainty because I absolutely don't, but in the conversation that led to this, where somebody said something about hope, and I'm like, hope is terrifying. And in my head, like when we talk about hope, I go to Emily Dickinson, hope is the thing with feathers and it perches in the soul and it never asked a thing of me. And then I go to, this song by Lana Del Rey of, hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me to have. And then this idea
Lana
of
Del Rey. I love music, so I have to look that up. Lana
look,
Del
look,
Rey.
look that up. It's definitely driving with the windows down music. Um, the Ted Lasso episode of
Mm.
like, hope is the thing that kills you, or is it the thing that saves you? Is hope isn't a strategy? It's not a solution. And also this idea of like, no one is coming. And so somewhere in, that's like a sneak peek of what it's like inside my head on a daily basis. And all of that swirl, I think that's partly, my dad imparted a lot of Buddhist philosophy to me, and living in Berkeley and studying at Cal for a little bit, like all of that kind of came together in this idea of the only thing I'm certain of is that everything is uncertain, and the only thing I'm certain of is that it's up to me to deal with that. And whether that means action or inaction or, a strategic pause, that's what I can put my faith in, is this idea that whatever happens, I'm the one that's got to figure it out. And I'm allowed to ask for help, and I'm allowed to throw a flag, and I'm allowed to, read books and learn from people who are smarter than me. But ultimately, that's of late, that's where I put my faith, is less in, less in something that can be easily defined, especially because, I struggle with the idea of, the concept of, higher powers and what the universe is. And then once I have that struggle, the universe will like just something will get put in my path and I'll be like, come on. Like the writers were clearly planning this a few seasons ago, what's happening here?
Yes, totally.
So it's like in all of that, I
Yeah.
just I tend to find certainty in the uncertainty,
Yeah.
but that's also not necessarily the most comfortable place to live your life 24/7.
But if you're finding certainty in the uncertainty, it certainly can make you feel confident because whatever you are certain about, this uncertainty will come to pass.
Yes, I am
Okay, let
I am
me
a
let me
I'm
let
a
me go through that
confident-
again.
yeah,
Whatever you
Whatever
are,
you're uncertain about,
you are uncertain about.
because you are confident in your uncertainty, that uncertainty will come to pass. In other words, you will be uncertain again.
Yeah, if you have no expectations, like if you're a optimist, pessimist, if you're a pragmatist, then you're kind of always right, like, or I'm right or I'm surprised. So like that idea, but I don't know. I think that that's why the conversation around hope always is a challenge for me, because I want to be hopeful. I have goals and ideas for my future and for, what I want my next job to be, what I want, my life to look like in 20 years. But also, eh,
Yeah, right. You have health, you have Jewish hope.
Yeah, I love that word you used, swirl, because I think you can rate people. Now, I don't mean rate in a heavy way, but I think you can think
Organize.
about people, organize people
Yeah.
in their swirl ratio. You know, how much swirl you got going in your head. And as soon as you said that, I felt like you had said something that I really recognized in you from the start, right? So when I met you through Zach, I think the first time, I could tell that you had more swirl than me, you know. So I am
They're pretty swirly.
well, actually, I think I am less swirly than people might imagine I am.
Ah,
Not to talk about myself, but one of the things but of course, let's talk about me.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
one of the things I like to say is people say, well, you're such a rebel or, an innovator or whatever. And I always say, I only feel comfortable doing that when I'm on a good foundation.
Yeah.
So there's a distinction you can make about someone's swirl index. Some people can swirl without a foundation.
Mhm.
I can't do that kind of swirl. That makes me a little antsy. Actually, it makes me very antsy.
I mean,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think you have to have a safety net, and people, w- it is dangerous to fly without a safety net. But I also think that some people don't have that. Like, having that safety net or having that foundation is very much a privilege. And so what do you do if that's not how you've been raised or how you've
Mm-hmm.
trained or part of your life? You got to be afraid and do it anyway. But I also think that, Carmen, what's interesting about what you just said is the idea of it brought to mind the idea of you can be trained in some ways to do this. Like, I'm not an analyst. There are lots of reasons why I would make a very good analyst and lots of reasons why I would make a terrible analyst. But I think part of that, like, analytic tradecraft and that mindset really teaches you how to process uncertainty and weigh it and measure it and
Right.
evaluate it and determine your confidence level of how uncertain or certain am I in this uncertainty? And then you can, like, look at it scientifically and piece it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that definitely seems like, obviously it's something, you're both very familiar with in your own lives and your own careers. But I think that, learning how to do that is a really valuable skill.
Yeah. And then also learning how to how to not do that. Not put so much faith in your analysis that you don't notice a change in your uncertainty. Like
Yeah.
to be attuned to your own uncertainty and allow your uncertainty to vacillate. Once you've reduced your uncertainty, to allow it to actually increase again. Yeah. Well, I sort of want to talk about something, and I grabbed my Pandas, so I noticed that, like, I must be insecure about it. So the Panda's gonna help me have courage. Um, I sort of want to talk about what it's like to be Jewish now. Do we dare?
So I think the safest way for me to talk about that, because it is so deeply personal, and it's something that I don't even really talk about with, close friends and, family. Like, there's some people with whom I have a shared understanding, and we just kind of look at each other and nod and then sip our wine and move on. I think for me, taking it back up, and this is something that, I I ended up in the intelligence community ultimately because I lost a bet,
Mhm.
and that's another story. But
Yeah.
the idea of what that mission is about, I think, is important, because for me, it's about, like, history of, you know, like public service and military and all of these things that came down from my family to me, and all of that generational impact slash generational trauma, and, you know, families, survivorship, and all of these, you know, things that the universe had to happen just so in order for me to exist in this moment. When I think about that, and I think about what anyone's identity is, I always come back to this place of, sorry, the cat's about to join the conversation.
Oh, nice.
I always think of this idea of what is that like for other people? Hi. See, he knew I was getting into a deep conversation. So
Name of cat?
this is Catullus Archimedes Thor,
Oh,
Okay.
oh my
otherwise known
goodness.
as Tully.
Okay.
But I mean, I think the baseline of humanity is remembering that we all have these experiences. So when I think of, you know, that's part of what drew me to like this idea of a national security mission, is how do we keep people safe?
Yeah.
And what does safety look like, and what does it mean? And how can I try and further the safety that, you know, my grandparents certainly did not have? And what does that mean from a global perspective? Because obviously we know some people are safer than others, and some environments are safer than others. And, you know, I could go down the list, but like I'm hearing my ethics people in the back of my head saying, stop, stop. But I mean, for when it comes to my own identity, that's something I think about is, you know, that the Jewish concept of tikkun olam and fixing the world. And what does
Is
that
that
look
what that means? Fixing the
That's what
world?
that
Yes.
Putting all
So-
the little sparks of the world that have been broken apart back together.
and you know, then like that brings in like that Japanese concept, oh, the name escapes me,
Oh,
where you're
yes, of
doing
the-
things with gold.
Yes,
Continue.
yes. Fixing the broken, and it's better.
Yeah.
And I don't think any one of us could presume that we could do that on our own. And I don't think any one of us, like if you got a group of 5 of us together and said, how do we do this? Let's make a plan. We've got all the power, money, and resources. Let's go do it. None of us would agree. So I think it's more the idea of how can we take those incremental steps that are authentic to us in ways to just, you know, do better, be better, put goodness out there, and trust that the uncertainty is going to be what it is, and send, you know, the love and light to the people that we know are dealing with the harder things and don't have the foundation and the safety net and the privilege that we have, frankly, just as, you know, as Americans. And thinking of those things and letting that guide us is something that, now that I think about, is probably also pretty Jewish too.
That's beautiful.
So one thing, I'm sorry, Julie, do you want to respond? Because I have something I want to say here, but
Oh, I just think that was beautiful.
yeah,
And
it is beautiful.
basically what I think the kind of response I have as well. And I think there's a piece for me, it's a differentness. For you, you're clearly Jewish. Your name contains the 2 biggest names
Exactly.
in the
Yes.
Jewish family. Like you're not, no one's gonna think you're not Jewish, but with me, everyone thinks I'm not Jewish, right? And so because I converted and my last name is Mossbridge, which sounds like a British name, you know, it's very Anglified, but it comes from Moscovitz crossed with Walbridge, which is an English name. And so there's a whole different dynamic. So I have to choose, like, I need to say out loud that I'm Jewish right now, especially because a lot of people feel like they can't. And I think it's important to be able to say that and to notice that we have the freedom to say that and to feel safe saying
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I think that issue of safety is fascinating to me, because again, growing up Jewish in Texas, again, that's another deep dive of how all of that went. And I was, so Cohen-Levy is my married name. I mean, I'm not married anymore, but that was my married name, and that was a choice. But I was always unmistakably Jewish unless I was in very specific categories. You know, for example, like if I there were some places in Houston, like they have different names now, but like if I was walking through, you know, 2nd Ward or 3rd Ward, they'd be like, maybe she's Hispanic. When I took a high school trip to Italy, I would kind of get the, you know, people would come up and speak to me in Italian.
Right.
you know, so like I was able to, there are some contexts in which I was able to pass as something different, but for the most part, I've always been unmistakably that. And, you know, because of that, because of my family heritage of like 3 out of 4 grandparents have like this tribal identity that they've protected and preserved, you know, when we were making the choice of, you know, what the name of our family would be, it was an intentional choice to say, you know what, we're going to lean into this. And I viewed it as I've never been able to escape it. So what does it matter? And I know that when people like, I've been in meetings and conversations where people like, Amelia Cohen-Levy, so you're, and I'm like, I mean, really?
Do you
Like,
have to confirm your suspicion?
but the flip side of that also is, of course, that, you know, if I order pizza delivery, I change the name to who they're delivering to. There are parking garages I've parked at where I hand over my debit card and it's clear that I can never go back to that garage again. So there's a flip side to, you know, that as well, that I think is something a lot of people are dealing with and processing.
So this isn't what I wanted to say, but you reminded me of this. So I went to high school in El Paso, Texas, and I imagine Houston has the most vibrant Jewish community in Texas, either Houston or Dallas Fort Worth, right? But
Houston,
yeah, Houston, yeah. So
my mother would insist that I say Houston wins. So on
yeah,
behalf of my mother, Houston
yeah.
wins.
But El Paso doesn't.
Mm-mm.
And so I went to high school, I was a debater, and the big team that we debated, although they were boys and I was a girl, so I rarely got to debate them because they were gender separated. But the two guys were David Cohen and Michael Heller, Cohen and Heller. It wasn't until I came to the East Coast several years later and started going to college here in DC that I realized Cohen and Heller were Jewish names. I had no clue. No one had given me the briefing. You know, I'm Puerto Rican, so I had no real perspective on that whatsoever. And then the comment I wanted to make, it's so interesting to me listening to you talk about your Jewish identity, and I hope this doesn't come across wrong. I'll just say it with great confidence in both of you, that for me, I'm thinking, golly, I wonder what it's like to be part of such an incredible tradition. There's a better word to use than that, because I'm just Puerto Rican, you know. I'm just no. I don't mean that. I don't mean to mock myself, but I'm a mutt. I am, you know, clearly a civilizational, cultural mutt, and I have been conscious all my life. Not all my life, but all my adult life. I've been conscious that for many people, being Puerto Rican, well, I'm not to say that. Some people I have actually told me or made me understand that they think being Puerto Rican is like an inferior sort of thing. And I could get into that story, but we don't have enough time or whatever. And so I just go, golly, I wonder what it's, but as a result, I'm very proud to be Puerto Rican, and I never not tell people that I'm Puerto Rican. Unlike a friend of mine I know who's a doctor, and I met him and I like him very much. He's a wonderful guy, and he said, I don't know, he volunteered that his heritage was Spanish, and I thought to myself, Spanish? Nobody says that unless they're from Spain. So I kept digging, and oh yeah, he's Puerto Rican, but he doesn't like to say that.
Oh,
Well, I mean, I think my counterpoint is, you know, Carmen, you of course have a strong sense of your identity. You have, you know, a proud, like to me, being Puerto Rican sounds badass. Like, and I, you know, like the culture and the community and the, you know, the developing in conjunction with and in opposition to. And I think that, you know, if we were to talk about diversity, I think that there are a lot of groups that would feel that and would feel a
Right.
connection to that. And so I think it's, to me, it's a question kind of what you do with it. I mean, for, you know, for my own family, you know, I know what that means. And, you know, on a, you know, like on a genetic level, that is a very real thing. But also, you know, the spectrum of Judaism encompasses, you know, faith, it encompasses religion, it encompasses ethnicity, it encompasses, you know, this tribal nature. And so it's definitely a spectrum. That's why it's not a checkbox on any of the, you know, DEIA forms, because it's too hard to pin down. And then you put the religious aspects of it, and it's like, wait, that's a whole other thing.
Mhm.
But I actually grew up finding myself envying people who had a distinct cultural identity that wasn't necessarily tied to a religious construct or a perceived religious construct, because to me that spoke to a different level of community and community tradition
Interesting.
and
Very
what that
interesting. Yeah,
means.
I hadn't had
Yeah.
that. I had never really thought about what the parameters are or potential boundaries are by the religious nature of the Jewish identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause, like, you can be Puerto Rican and you can be Jewish,
Right.
you're still Puerto
Right.
Rican.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
and my contention is Carmen is Puerto Rican and Jewish.
Well, what is known about the Spanish settlement of the New World is that there's the original family groups that came over were not overwhelmingly, but disproportionately Jewish or Muslim, Muslim converts who were trying to convince the Spanish that they really had become Catholic, which is why, of course, everybody in Spain eats pork.
They
Right.
they were they were moving for a reason.
Yes,
I
exactly.
completely agree. I mean, I will say this in so much as I have any power to do this, but I think that the idea of questioning and asking questions and feeling safe to ask questions and being encouraged to like ask the question, say the thing, be the rebel, challenge the status quo is something that I think most rabbis say is, you know, that's a pretty Jewish thing. And
Yeah.
anyone who does that can get like the honorary, you know, the
Yeah.
honorary pass in so much as there is one. So I think that you know, Carmen, that's something that I very much see in you and in your career and in your writings and everything you've done is the sense of, I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions now. And that's, you know, that's something that
That's so true.
Jewish
That's so true.
tradition
Let me
kind of says,
ask you a
yes.
few questions.
That's
Well,
literally why I converted is I wanted to be in a tradition that had a faith tradition that asked questions primarily. Like that's the defining feature.
I mean, it's the questions with answers, without answers, questions with a choose your own adventure, but also here are some parameters. Like I find that aspect of it fascinating. But Julia, I mean, I know that you're a lot of the work that you do, especially just in how does the brain work? How do we think? How do we make connections? You know, I that's something that I find really fascinating. And, you know, on the list of, you know, things I probably should have studied more were, you know, is psychology and those interconnectedness. So I'm curious as to how all of that, especially in today's world of cognitive dissonance and watching people struggling to hold multiple thoughts in their head, you know, what is that, how does that feel for you? What does that mean for you?
Oh, I'm torn between going into another question answer. I'll have to speak very quickly because I know that we have to end earlier than we want to because of some commitments. Um, the question is, how does it feel for me to sort of be noticing all this cognitive dissonance and sort of be aware of what's going on in terms of the neuroscience?
Mhm.
It feels very whole. It feels like this is how the brain actually works, right? The brain actually works by having all these different parts that are doing different things. And actually it's almost like a group of people in your head, right? That have different talents and different motivations and different goals. And there is no supervisor, right? We say, oh, I'm the supervisor, but the I it's coming to recognize that the I is sort of a paper tiger. That there is no we fabricate a self in order to feel like there's a oneness there. But that self is really created from all these it's like this anarchy or it's not really an anarchy, it's like a comfortable anarchy or a worked out relationship between all these pieces. And it feels very whole to recognize that because it feels closer to the truth.
Mm.
I don't know, but I don't know how that relates in your mind to whatever we were talking about. That's interesting that you asked that question.
I mean,
I
I feel like
feel,
a mic drop moment if ever there was
Yeah.
one.
I feel like when we end this conversation, you just should, because Julia will be processing this one, you should just put in to be continued.
Yeah,
Because there's something so pure about this conversation, primarily because we entered into it without an agenda. We just wanted to share ourselves with ourselves.
yeah. All right, to be continued. I like
To
it.
be continued.
I'm here. I will always say yes to the both of you whenever you ask. So
I've really enjoyed this very much, getting to know you, Amelia, better, because um, I mean, I'll just be very straightforward. Sometimes when someone comes across to me as like perhaps too swirly, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure. But now I'm like, I'm being seduced by the swirliness, and I'm enjoying it.
I am going to, when we finish this call, I'm going to text somebody and say, Carmen just said that I am seducing her with, and you know exactly who that person is. But
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think we all, as we interact with each other, right? There's the first impression and, the second impression, and depending upon the context, what does that mean and how does that feel? And I just love the fact that, we were able to take the time to like dig deeper because I've wanted to learn
Yeah,
more about and
right.
from both of you. So this was an awesome morning. Thank you for it.
Yeah, I know. I
Thank
feel
you.
great.
I know, me too. I'm refreshed. But next time we
Okay.
dance. Next time we dance.
Yes. Show dancing.
Next
As
time we should dance.
as you wish.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right.
All right.
Well, have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Take care.
Yeah,
Behave yourselves.
Yes, we will. We shall.
no, we won't. Bye.
Bye.